greater than X.
What's up, everybody? Ryan Turford, the man on the moose here, and today we're here for another extra special, extra mile episode all about the Quarry. So this is the newest game from Supermassive Games, which they're the makers of games like Until Dawn and the Dark Pictures anthology games over at Bandai Namco. But this is their new refreshing take on the horror genre, published by 2K, and it was released on June 10th, 2022. I've had a chance to play the game, and I'm ready to give my full thoughts on the game. But before we get into all that, of course, if you're watching us right here on youtube.com/carpoolgaming, don't forget to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you haven't subscribed already. And don't forget to hit that notification bell to be notified whenever we go live, or to be notified whenever we come out with a new video like this one. Also, if you're listening on podcast feeds, don't forget to hit subscribe there as well, or rate us 5 stars if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And last but not least, if you want early access to this, as well as all of our other shows, head right over to patreon.com/carpoolgaming. Throw a little tip in the old tip jar and out comes content. Well, without further ado, let's jump into the Quarry and kind of give you my full thoughts on the game. So I've played through the game a couple times now, and here are kind of my thoughts on the game. So first of all, I've actually been kind of a big fan of Supermassive games for a long time, whether it's, Until Dawn or the Dark Pictures anthology games. I've always really enjoyed their style of horror as well as their game types, although I will say that some of the Dark Pictures anthology games for me personally have been, kind of hit or miss. But House of Ashes, for example, the one that released last year, I fell head over heels for. I love that game. In addition to Until Dawn, which was like one of my favorite games of 2015, which was already like a big stacked year for games. So that actually says quite a lot about that game. But so I was really excited when the Quarry got announced. It's interesting with this game because it actually had started out as a project over on Stadia. We actually learned that, not too long ago. And then 2K basically picked up the rights for it when Stadia essentially just shut down a lot of their, first party production. That's kind of where this project kind of went to the wayside. And then it was basically brought over to modern consoles. So I'm actually really happy that they were actually be able to bring this to other consoles besides Stadia. I don't know if I would have wanted to play this as a Stadia adventure, but the way that this game plays, it kind of makes sense as to why it would be on this platform, especially because you don't have there's a lot less time-sensitive moves in this game versus other ones. There's still quick-time events, obviously, carried over from Until Dawn, but they're a little more streamlined this time around, and there's not as many of them I found, although there are a lot of them towards the end of the game, but it's not like they don't go crazy with them. So what you're doing in this game, you're playing as 9 counselors at Hackett's Quarry campgrounds. Basically, it's just a summer camp where the 9 camp counselors basically send all the kids away because it's the last day of camp and everyone's kind of packing up to go home. But when an issue with the car starting it stops the counselors from leaving, they're basically forced to take refuge inside the cabin for the night, hoping to dodge any things that are in the woods. Now, mind you might be thinking, well, hey, why they've been at summer camp for a couple months now, why hasn't anything happened yet? And the game actually gives a good explanation as to how that works and why this night in particular, the night they were supposed to leave, was so important for them to leave anyways. But essentially they're hunted by a horrific threat. And that's all I'm going to kind of say about the story in general, because it's one of those things where this game plays very much like a movie, and I don't want to give too much away. I also think, too, the trailers for this game give a little too much away, so you might want to steer clear from those if you don't want to be spoiled on anything with this game. But the story itself, I thought was awesome. I really love the writing on display here. I love the quirky sense of humor that a lot of these characters had. I also thought it was well acted by the actors in question. We've also got some big name actors here like David Arquette and Ted Raimi and Lance Hendrickson. But they also play a lot of the more minor roles. They're not any of the camp counselors or anything like that. And more of the counselors, I think, really are what won me over anyways. Like I loved all the quips and dialogue that they had with each other. And I just, when they were interacting with each other, it really felt like there was a relationship there. It felt like these were characters that spent a summer camp together, but that at the same time, have only really known each other for a couple months in a lot of ways. There's a couple characters that have known each other for longer, but I love that dynamic of it. It really felt authentic in a lot of ways. So I really love the dialogue and the story in this game in particular. What was also interesting about the story is the pacing, because it does start off a bit slower where, the first couple chapters, you're essentially exploring the summer camp and walking around, and there's some great licensed music in this game as well. But there were certain moments where I was just walking around and experiencing like teen romance between these two characters that kind of sort of like each other but don't want to tell each other that they like each other. But it almost felt like I was playing something like Life is Strange or something like that, where you're exploring this campground and there's this nice sunset and stuff like that, and they're just chatting with some acoustic guitar in the background and stuff like that. So I thought there were some really interesting moments in the story, that it really was paced really well. Like I didn't feel like it took too long to get going with the story, because by chapter 3 you're really kind of starting to get into the thick of things and kind of finding out all of what's going on and kind of unraveling the big plot that's going on here. Especially because that's when you meet the threat for the first time, and I love kind of the way that all that stuff is paced out. It really feels like a great, almost like horror television series. You could say it's kind of like a movie, but I'd say it's a little bit too long to be a movie. It feels more like an 8-episode horror TV show or something like that. Like something I'd find on Shudder is essentially like what I would kind of equate the story in The Quarry to be like. But I mean, as a fan of 80s horror, as a fan of, stuff like Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street or something like that, like I was totally in with the story with this game, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Also, periodically throughout the game, similarly to other supermassive games, you've also got kind of a narrator character that you go back to at the end of every chapter. But in this case, you've basically got a fortune teller who used to work at this carnival that had things happen to it that have to do with the story that I'm not going to talk about. And basically you'll collect tarot cards throughout your experience, and you can basically ask her for like your psychic reading, and she'll basically give you like a small video based on the tarot cards that you find that show you events that might come to pass, to offer some guidance. It really is what we saw in the previous games, using the totem system or the portrait system from the Dark Pictures Anthology games. But they basically give you the option of seeing those, rather than as soon as you pick up the object, you basically see the video play in front of you, just in case you don't want spoilers, just in case you don't want to be spoiled on it. In fact, my very first playthrough of the game, I didn't play with any of the fortune stuff. It really wasn't until I went through it the second time, one, because I wanted the achievements for actually, getting my fortune told, but also too, I wanted to make sure to at least look through it for the purposes of this review. And I thought that was all well done. I liked the idea of it doing this way versus what they do in the other games, and giving you the option of not having to see those if you don't want to be spoiled. So I definitely think that worked a little bit better this time around as well. As far as the gameplay is concerned, though, for the most part, it's more of like a walking around kind of adventure. It feels very much like any other supermassive game, or anything like, again, like Life is Strange or any of the Telltale games, if you've played those before, where essentially you've got a character walking around, and again, at different parts of the story, you play as different camp counselors, depending on where you are in the story, and you're essentially walking around and interacting with the environment, either picking up objects and looking at them, or basically doing the little things to kind of progress the story forward. It's very light on the gameplay itself. There is a bit of exploration while you're exploring some areas, like when you're in the cabin. The cabin's quite large, so you can walk around the cabin and go look in drawers and stuff like that for different clues to help piece the overall mystery together, as well as finding collectibles like the tarot cards as well. But the interactivity is a little more streamlined this time around versus the previous games, because in stuff like Until Dawn or the Dark Pictures Anthology games, when you would pick up an object, you would essentially pick up the object and then you would hold down like the right trigger to like move your hand around like this in like a twisting pattern to kind of look around the object essentially and examine it yourself. Whereas in this game, it cuts to a cutscene where the character picks up the item and then examines it, and then it gives you the clue from there, or whatever thing is associated with it, or progresses the story forward rather than you physically examining it yourself. And I personally actually think that this is actually a good change. I know there are some people online that have been saying that they don't like this change, but personally, I like it because it kind of, streamlines the story a little bit. But also it takes out some of the goofiness that comes with, picking up the object and examining it. And likewise, once you've examined an object, you don't really have to, go back and look at it again. So I do like that you can't really miss anything as well by picking up objects this time around. So I do like the streamlined ability of that. Not only that, too, the QuickTime events also have been streamlined as well, where instead of having the 4 space buttons this time around, everything is done on the analog stick, and you can pick whatever analog stick you want, left analog stick or right analog stick. It doesn't matter. They both work, and it's usually just up, down, left, or right, essentially. So I like that as well. That way you're not, fumbling with, making sure you've got the correct, face button or whatnot. I think it just makes it a little bit more simple for, less, like, more casual gamers. Because I think, as someone who likes to watch people play stuff for the first time a lot of times, whether it's on Twitch or YouTube and stuff like that, especially watching casual gamers play, that's one of the things I've seen casual gamers kind of mess up a lot with, games like Until Dawn, where they missed it because they don't know off the top of their head where the triangle button is. So I think it makes it a little bit more intuitive for, newer players if they just use the analog stick for everything. So I think that they did a good job with that. And again, I think just having less QuickTime events overall was definitely a helpful thing. One other new feature that they added to this game as well, which I believe needs to be unlocked, but I'm not exactly sure because my version of the game already had this feature unlocked, is there's essentially a 3 live system in this game. So if a character dies in the story, because every character can be killed or every character can live, and there's a bunch of permutations depending on what characters you save and what characters you don't, there's a 3 live system where essentially you can choose, basically, if you accidentally, picked a choice that killed a character and you didn't actually mean to choose that choice, you can actually rewind and have it basically go back to the moment where you made your choice. So then that way you can save that character, and you can use 3 of the lives throughout your entire playthrough. And then once those 3 lives are gone, whoever's dead is dead from there on. So I do like that feature being there as well. Again, if you choose not to, if you don't want to deal with it, if you just want to, play it, as a standard, super massive experience and just have whatever characters die, then you just choose not to engage with it. You can just hit dismiss every time because it doesn't force you to use that feature. But I do like that it's there, because I there were a couple times where I picked a choice where I wasn't expecting it to just kill the character, and it just killed the character. So, they're like, sometimes they're a bit more ambiguous about that, but I think with them having this feature in here, they know that they can be a little more ambiguous with some of the choices. So I think that's why I'm glad that the system's there. So I think that was actually a positive, a net positive. So all in all, I think the gameplay additions to this particular experience, I think, are actually worthwhile additions. Like, I think the gameplay itself just flowed really well. I mean, there's just a lot more cutscenes in this game, I think, percentage wise, versus the other, super massive games I found, where you're doing a little less exploring this time around, and you're more, watching it as a movie and then interacting with it with your choices and then going from there. So I actually like the different changes this time around, and I thought it was quite fun. As far as the visuals concerned, I think this game looks great. I played it on Xbox Series X, and again, game ran really well. I didn't really run into any issues playing it or anything like that. And then visually, I think it's not a stunning game or anything like that, but I do love the character models. I think look great. I think the environments look great. And again, it really just kind of echoes that, 80s horror feel to it. So I liked it from a visual standpoint as well. I thought it was a great looking game. There is some wonkiness though with some visual effects, like hair physics are a thing, especially with the characters with longer hair. They kind of sometimes glitch out or do weird things. So just be aware that there's some stuff going on. And I've noticed that they've put out some patches since the game came out that have helped a little bit with that. But even going back and revisiting it right before, recording this review today on the 21st of June, that doesn't seem like it's fully fixed yet, but I can tell that it's definitely getting there. So just FYI, there's some wonkiness there, but otherwise, I think visually this game looked great. The music in this game as well, as I touched on earlier, I think is awesome. I love the use of licensed music in this game, but if you are a streamer or a content creator like we are here at Carpool Gaming, there is an option in the game to turn all the licensed music off and replace it with, DRM free music essentially. which I think is a great move as well. It's something that I want to see, more companies take advantage of if they have licensed music in their games. But all in all, I love the licensed music. I think they made some great choices with some fantastic licensed music. And I don't want to spoil any of the music that's in the game. I think it's better to kind of experience it for yourself. Also, additionally, there's some multiplayer options as well. You basically got the co-op modes from the Dark Pictures anthology games kind of returning, but they're named a little bit differently. It's just called 2-player co-op as opposed to, movie mode, because what they did this time with movie mode is they did something a little bit different with it, where movie mode in this game isn't the co-op mode with 2 players. It essentially just plays the game as a movie, and you can select a couple of parameters ahead of time. You can set it so that you can watch the entire game without playing it yourself, where everyone lives, but also you can set it so that everyone dies. As well, you can actually go in and basically set all the character traits of all the characters yourself, and then just see how the game plays out. So I think that's actually like a really interesting move. Like, if there's someone out there who wants to if you just want to like watch the experience, but not actually play it yourself and just have a good time with like a really good, like binge worthy horror series, I think that's a great option to have. I really like that it's there. I don't know how often I'll want to use it myself, just because I love the interactivity that's in this game and kind of making the choices myself. But I love that it's there for those that maybe, again, if there is a casual gamer that picks it up, or if you're playing it with your significant other and maybe they don't want to just play it and you just want to watch it as an experience, I love that option's there. I think that's a great feature. But otherwise, the co-op modes I think are great as well. Right now, we only have access to local co-op because online co-op still hasn't been released at the time of this recording. It's supposed to be coming out in July, though, so sometime next month we should have online co-op. And I'm excited to play that because I think that'll be fun too. But for now, I think the co-op works really well. Again, it's very similar to what we saw in the Dark Pictures anthology games, where you basically almost draft the characters between your 2 players. So you basically evenly split up the characters however you want to split them up between the 2 players. And then it'll every time it switches characters, it'll tell you, let's say you're playing as Lauren, it switches to Lauren. It's like, all right, it's Lauren's turn, player 1, press A when you're ready. So you kind of pass the controller back and forth. So I thought that always worked really well in the Dark Pictures anthology games, and it's basically the same mode here. So if you like the co-op there, I think you're going to be totally fine with it. But let's move on to final thoughts. What did I think about the game overall? Honestly, the Quarry at this point of the year in June of 2020, and especially for someone like me who's a big horror fan, like this is probably the best game I've played this year, or at least the game I've enjoyed the most this year. Obviously, quality wise, I think, something like Elden Ring might be a little bit higher as far as, overall game of the year nominee, but I personally really enjoyed my time with the Quarry. I really enjoyed, replaying it again, basically playing it twice for the purpose of this video and kind of seeing what was different with my second playthrough the second time around, because I didn't save everyone the first time. So I wanted to make sure I did a playthrough where I saved everyone. And now I really want to go in and kind of play another playthrough where I murder everyone, because that's always fun too. I just really enjoyed this game. I think it's probably my favorite Supermassive game, or at least it's up there, because I love Until Dawn as well. I think that game's amazing as well. But I think like the gameplay and the pacing's a little bit better balanced this time around with the Quarry. You can beat it in about 8 hours. So, I mean, it's not a very long experience. And that playtime's just going to depend on how much you want to explore. If you don't explore as much, you're probably closer to the 7-hour range. And then likewise, the more you explore, you're probably coming close to the 9-hour range. One other complaint that I did have, though, in final thoughts here is that the chapter select mode, I don't love the implementation of what they did this time around with it, because essentially when you use chapter select after you unlock it when beating the final game, it'll allow you to select a chapter, but it overwrites your save and then removes all your collectibles except for the collectibles you had collected up to that point. Meaning essentially if you want to have a run where you have all the collectibles, you actually need to replay the game from the start, get every the collectible in one run. And then the second you use chapter select again, you will then lose those collectibles again. So that's something I don't love about this. I wish they would patch it where, you just had the collectibles going forward. Also, it's a minor nitpick, but I wish there was a way to, when you use chapter select, I wish there was a way to skip dialogue, or even having like a smaller chapter select within the chapter select, like almost like key moments specifically. I wish you could select more of those, because replaying an entire chapter can take an hour or two sometimes. And if you just need to get to a specific point to get a specific upgrade or to make a specific choice, it does make it a bit tough to play through that whole experience again. So I just wish I think the chapter select needs a little bit more work. Which again, it's weird to me that they made this choice, because the chapter select has actually been really great in the Dark Pictures games and also Until Dawn, where, when you use the chapter select, you select the chapter you want. And even though it doesn't have the little minute, selection that I discussed, it does at least keep your collectibles the entire time. So it does make it really easy to go back and get any of the collectibles you missed, especially because there's achievements and trophies tied to that. So I hope that gets patched at some point. It's weird that they would change it around this time around for the Quarry. And again, I just hope that, if someone out there at Supermassive is listening or watching this, I just really hope that's something y'all change with this. But otherwise, all in all, I think this game's great. I think it's fantastic. If you like horror games, if you like, 80s horror films specifically, I think you're going to dig the Quarry. I think it's great. And I think it's well worth your pickup, well worth your time. And likewise as well, if you weren't really into any of, Supermassive previous games, this probably isn't going to be for you as well, just because of, again, the gameplay isn't, too different or anything like that. It's still in the same vein as their previous games. So if you didn't really love the lack of interactivity and things like that, then obviously this game's not going to be for you as well. Also, I believe there's a free trial out for this game as well. So you can definitely go check it out for yourself and try out the Quarry. I certainly encourage you to do so, because I think this game's great. Well, that's it for me on this Extra Mile. I'm Ryan Turford. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can also hit us up on YouTube at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, on Patreon at patreon.com/carpoolgaming, and on podcast services around the globe. I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the Extra Mile, all about the Quarry, and we're out.